Actually, I'd like to start out with a little bit of appreciation for our signers. We have one of them up here, but I found it enriched our meeting to have signing. So I don't know what you felt like at the end of yesterday, but I felt like I had seen so many wonderful ideas and had so many conversations and met so many great new people. And it was just a really good kind of exhaustion at the end of the day. And hopefully you all had a good rest. And here we are to continue the arc of the program we're on together. So I just want to remind you where we've been and where we're going. Yesterday was really planned to get you to know each other and to get to know the ideas in the program and start thinking about the kinds of expertises we have in the room to work with. And today is really organized to thinking about future research. What are the next research questions that you might want to tackle, be able to tackle? Where does this field go next? And to think about those tensions and contradictions to achieving equitable futures that are our program theme. So what are those? What are the most important ones that we as a field should pay attention to? So what I want to remind you is that what we're aiming to in our arc is at the end of the day we have a town hall session, which is a feedback session, where Amy and Tanya will listen to the field and hear from you what you think the research questions are that ought to be explored. What are the tensions we ought to be tackling? And so we're trying to collect those as the day goes by. We're going to use some poll everywhere as we go to collect input from everyone and then start to digest that. So it's going to be interactive like yesterday was, but now we're aiming towards the future, not just learning about each other. So I'm encouraging you to follow along and make that switch with us and use this meeting to think about where you want to go. We had a lot of great activity on Twitter as well, so we'd love for you also to be putting out there to the world. We had a good webcast audience as well. And the last thing I want to remind you of is an evaluation survey at the end of the meeting that Judy does. Judy is nodding. Every time we've done this meeting, we do an evaluation survey, and it has helped so much in improving the quality of the meeting because we learn what's working. We can't be everywhere to see every experience, so we learn what's working and what we can improve. And we use that information, so that's how the meeting gets better. So please do the evaluation survey. Okay, so we're going to start this morning with some introductions about funding opportunities. And we want you to learn about those funding opportunities, but also use this time to start thinking about the research questions you would want to explore and bring those to the surface. And I'm going to bring up Sarita, who's going to introduce our panel.
Good morning, everyone. Bright and early. Hope you all had a great day yesterday and a good evening. As I start, I'm going to ask our panelists to make their way up onto the podium and get seated and settle themselves so we can go right into their remarks. Just reminding you again, as Jeremy just did, we have this hashtag for Twitter, NSFCL19. I hope and we've seen some wonderful pictures and images and texts and stuff from people, so keep that going. You're really helping us tell the arc of the story that is happening here over the next 2 days, over the last 2 days, to yesterday and today. Amy made it a point to mention all of the program officers who were involved with cyber learning yesterday. If there are NSF program officers in the room, if you could stand up so people can know who you are and seek you out over the course of this morning and ask questions, that would be great. Thank you. Thank you. Great. Thank you. It's my privilege to introduce this panel. And as you listen to what they have to say about other funding opportunities in various agencies, think about, I hope, what you heard yesterday, the conversations you had, ideas that came to you, and think about where they might fit as you hear what everyone has to say. So I'm pleased to introduce the panel, and if you could just please raise your hand as I say your name, because you might not be sitting in the order that you are in the program. We are joined by Evan Height at NSF, who is representing the Division of Research and Learning, DRL. Amy Baylor at NSF, obviously the co-lead for cyber learning, but here to talk to us about AI and future of work initiatives. Erin Higgins, IES, the National Center for Education Research. Tony Beck, from the NIH, National Institute of General Medical Sciences. So we thank them for being here. They'll go through a 5 to 7 minute presentation, no slides, just talking to you about the various opportunities that they're here to represent. When they're done at 8:45, we will have an opportunity to go to tables. Each of them will go to a table where you can then join them to have conversations about anything you're interested in talking about and to learn more about what they're here to tell you about. So we won't necessarily do a Q&A after this session, but we'll have about 45 minutes to have your questions answered at individual tables that they'll go to. So we are also expecting Henry Kotz, who I'm not sure is here yet, so he'll go last, and when he's here, you'll know, because he'll come up to the table late. But thank you, and thank our panel for being here, and I'll let them get started. Evan, I think I'll turn it over to you to start. Thank you.
First, okay.
I think Evan was going to give us a welcome.
Well, that's all right. No, I'll go up here. It's okay. Okay, good morning, everybody. It's good to see everybody bright and early this morning. I'm here to welcome you on behalf of DRL, the Division of Research on Learning. As you may know, DRL supports research and development in all areas of STEM learning and teaching in all different environments, formal settings, informal settings, online settings. For all age groups, we'd like to say pre-K to gray is our remit. So it's a broad division, and I hope you'll have opportunities to hear about what sorts of research we support in DRL. We're happy to be associated with the Cyber Learning program, and first I just want to thank the PIs here, the Cyber Learning PIs, and everyone else for the great work you're doing, and just express our appreciation for what you're doing. I personally enjoyed so much going to the poster session last night, and I talked with some of you and snuck peeks at some of the other posters. We're really proud to be associated with projects that are addressing the future of learning and the future of technology, which is just so well embodied by cyber learning. Now, cyber learning, as you probably know, is a program that cuts across directorates at NSF. So it's a collaboration of the EHR Directorate, Education and Human Resources, Computer Science Directorate, Engineering, and SBE, Social, Behavioral, and Economic Sciences. And for us, it's really a perfect example of a cross-directorate program in the sense that so many of your projects really engage the intellectual merit across multiple academic fields of study. It's just a very nice collaboration. And again, we're always really excited to hear about what you're doing. It also, cyber learning is nicely connected to the NSF 10 Big Ideas. And I know you've been hearing about those as well. And right now, in the title of the current cyber learning solicitation, it refers to Future of Work at the Human Technology Frontier, which is its own solicitation, and you could expect more funding opportunities that are directly under that name. But I'd like to talk about future of work for a minute. This is just something that is in the news all the time. There was just a Gallup poll that said that one half of American adults are experiencing something called skills anxiety. That these are people, they could be college graduates, that they could be people who haven't gone to college. Essentially, that they are worried whether their skills will allow them to keep their current job. That they are worried whether their skills will allow them to advance and get the job that they really want. And that is one of the reasons why the cyber learning program, the research you're doing and the research that you could do is so critically connected to the future of work, because you all have the potential in your projects to address this need of adults. And even if you haven't thought of yourself as someone who works in this adult learning space before, still potentially you have the expertise. You could address what is such a growing global need. When people talk about the future of work, want to think about it some more, I always recommend they go to the OECD reports on the future of work. Has anyone seen the OECD report on the future of work? It's definitely, it is Googleable. And in particular, I recommend you go to Chapter 6 of this report. The whole report is great, but Chapter 6 talks about different learning systems. You have what you might think of as a traditional initial learning system, the K-20 system that's so well established in this country. But then the OECD report also talks about adult learning systems. What do you do after you've done your K through 16 or your K through 20 or your K through 24 or more, but then you find 10, 20 years later that you need to go back, you need more adult learning. So there's some very good ideas in there, and I encourage you to have a look at that. I should mention that just after I leave the podium here, I'm going to another PI meeting for the NSF Convergence Accelerator. Has anyone heard of this program? So the way I would put it is that future of work at NSF is more basic research oriented, and Convergence Accelerator is like a Silicon Valley incubator or accelerator where we're trying to encourage our investigators to come up with products, say within a 2-year time span, that would actually help workers, help employers, something that could go to market. So I encourage you to look out for other opportunities in the Convergence Accelerator. There's not something posted right now, but I'm sure it'll continue to be connected to what you're doing. Let me just quickly make a few thank yous. I just want to express, as others have done, my appreciation to Circle for managing another really great meeting. And I also wanted to thank Amy and Tanya and all the program officers who've been associated with cyber learning. So we just did it, but we've had a few more people walk in. So could people just raise their hands if they're currently an NSF program officer? Okay. And let me just keep your hands up. Who's a former NSF program officer? Few more hands. So let me just say, well, thank you, everybody. But let me say that being a program officer at NSF is a really nice opportunity to contribute to the field, to really show national and international leadership for a scholarly field. It's good working environment. You learn about the whole grants process and so on. It's a really good experience. In DRL, in the Division of Research and Learning, we have 2 program officer opportunities. One is aimed at our DRK-12 program. It's for someone who does K-12 science or math education. The other is aimed at our ASL program, our informal program, someone who does STEM education in relation to the media, say like film or television or online. So these 2 programs are searching for program officers. Although it's DRK-12 and ASL, you could imagine also working within cyber learning, or you could imagine these programs recruiting people who know something about cyber learning. So if you're interested in working in DRL, please contact me or any of the program officers here. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Henry Kautz. I'm the Division Director for Intelligent Information Systems, IIS. So I'm very pleased to be here to welcome you. My own area is artificial intelligence, and I really look to you as people who are going to help solve 2 massive problems. The way technology is used in K-12 education is broken. I'm sure you're all aware of the many studies that show that when laptops and iPads are thoughtlessly dumped into classrooms, student understanding actually goes down. We need to really rethink how we use technology in K-12 so that it's not a matter of trying to save money through some shortcut, but as a way to really deepen student engagement and understanding. And that requires fundamental research. And that's exactly what we do here in this NSF program. Another place where education is fundamentally broken, as you're all aware, is college. The idea that everyone in the country should simply go from high school to spend 4 years at an elite college, completely disengaged from real-world work, and then enter the workforce and never cross the threshold of an educational institution again, is over. It's going to take a few years for most of the colleges and universities in this country to catch on to that message, and a few, on the basis of their name and their deep pockets, will continue. But as we know, the world is changing in a way that education is a lifetime process, and that the idea that education is separate from doing is just wrong. And both in the area of STEM education, where students learn about using computer technology, as well as using computer technology for all forms of higher level education, has to change. And again, you are the people who are going to help pioneer these new methods. So thank you again for engaging with this program. I've been at NSF about a year and a half now, and I tend not to be a fan of faddish convergent research. I'm often the person in the room who's saying, we need this more core research. All this talk of convergence is nice, but it's can be kind of superficial. But this is a program I really believe in, and this is a program I think is going to have some of the biggest impacts on our country. Thank you.
Hi. Yeah, that's fine. We're fine. Hi. So I'm Amy Baylor again. Saw you all a few times yesterday. So we did have a session yesterday on the future of work, big idea. So I wasn't going to talk about it a lot. I just wanted to give sort of an overview of it for those of you that weren't at the session and might be interested in it, because as you can see, everyone from NSF keeps talking about these big ideas. I wasn't on. I'm really loud. I scare myself. So this big idea, and as you know, the Cyber Learning Program has kind of had a theme in this big idea for the last 2 years on the solicitation. The idea with it is to take a specific work context, a job, firefighting, farming, manufacturing, teaching, right? And figure out what the future is going to look like in terms of the human technology system that worker will be in. And all the learning that's around that, right? So you've got learning on the job, upskilling, reskilling, lifelong learning, and all dependent on the job, right? So it's going to be job specific. So in this program, we funded some really great things, and I think the nature, the fundamental, what makes this program distinct is that it is convergent research, and you generally have like 3 or 4 projects kind of happening at the same time together, because you've got sort of social scientist, education researcher, technology, computer science engineer researcher, maybe an economist, maybe a sociologist, and all working together, converging research together to look at the future of work. There's different ways to engage in this big idea. Right now, there is not an active solicitation, but there's a lot of interest in this big idea. And in terms of what we did last year is we had planning grants as well as full grants. So it's something, if you're interested in that, keep your eyes out. And if there's an option, a planning grant is really important for a program like this so that you can get to know each other and find your team. These are exciting interdisciplinary projects, but they're hard. They take a lot of time. There's a lot of conversations that have to happen to make these teams work to be successful. So I was going to just talk about, just real briefly, about one of the projects we funded through this big idea a couple years ago was for teaching. And it was to develop sort of a cognitive assistant, an automated teaching assistant for teachers. And again, the focus isn't on the learners here, so don't freak out, but because this is about work. So how can we make teachers' jobs better, more efficient, more fun, even, have a better quality of life? And so in this project, it was Kurt Van Lane was the lead PI on it, and it was an automated teaching assistant so that it could help teachers see what's going on in the classroom, so sort of like a dashboard. They could walk around, and it helped them orchestrate activities. So you might have some kids working on a project here, another kid back here that's not paying attention, and get that information, and the vision of it is that then it would be automated to help the teacher focus on things that might be best for her or him to do. So it was a great a great example of how to think about this big idea. And the second thing I'm going to talk about, I can't talk about it as much as I wanted to talk about it, but I will say this, that there's a great interest, as Henry mentioned, in AI across the government. If you want to see what the government is doing with AI, there's a website called ai.gov, and you'll see some of the sort of wide-ranging things are happening across the government and government agencies. We had a convening, well, and the other thing is that there's a national AI research and development plan, again, across government and whatnot, and there was an update to that plan in June that basically said one of the key things we need is long-term investments in AI, long-term investments. Lots of other countries have, strong plans in this area as well. So we had a convening at NSF that Henry sponsored, and brought in industry people, we brought in other agencies, and had a lot of a discussion about what the future research of AI is, what might be some ways to work together, and so on. And when I was participating in that, there was so much interest in AI in education. I mean, the people couldn't all fit at the table. So there's really two ways I think about how our community can think about AI. I mean, very simply, it's sort of like how can we use AI in education to make education better, more personalized, more efficient, more engaging. And then the second is education in AI. How can we prepare the future workforce? Because there's a lot of people. I mean, the people that were at that particular convening were like, Amy, we all need the same 1,000 people in our industries that have this training, in AI to fill jobs. So there's two ways to think about it, sort of AI and education and AI, and then stay tuned, watch your emails from NSF, and there may be something that maybe will happen. I don't know.
Thank you.
Good morning. We're going to shift gears now and talk about non-NSF government funding opportunities. So I am from the U.S. Department of Education, and specifically I'm from the Institute of Education Sciences. How many people have heard of the Institute of Education Sciences? Oh, wow, that's great. Sometimes I come to events like this and it's like a couple people in the front. So wonderful. I'm glad that so many of you have heard of us. For those of you who have not heard of us, we are the research arm of the U.S. Department of Education, and we are independent and nonpartisan by law. So our agency is separated from offices in the rest of the department intentionally so that we can provide objective information to help guide policy decisions and improve practice. And we're organized into 4 centers. So the National Center for Education Statistics is the agency, or the part of our agency that focuses on trying to describe the state of education across the United States using large data sets. And then we have the National Center for Education Evaluation, which is our center that focuses on evaluations of federal programs, as well as does part of our knowledge utilization work. So if you've heard of the What Works Clearinghouse, that center works on trying to get syntheses of research that's out there and tries to put it out in a way that practitioners can understand it. And then finally, we have 2 research centers, the National Center for Education Research and the National Center for Special Education Research. I sit in this National Center for Education Research. Of those 2 centers, our goal is to do extramural grant funding. So we fund folks like you to work on new and innovative ways to solve challenges in education practice for students in grades pre-K up through grade 12, as well as post-secondary and adult education for the National Center for Education Research. And then the National Center for Special Education Research focuses on work for infants and toddlers up through adulthood, focused on students with disabilities. Typically, our grants programs are on a yearly cycle. So, for example, the last round of applications was due in late August, and those applicants will probably find out more about whether they're funded no later than July 1st of next year, and then sometime next spring of 2020, we'll be releasing requests for applications for our next round. So if you're interested in applying for a grant with us, that's the timeline we've been working off of. Obviously, it's subject to change, but just keep that in mind. Our website has the most updated funding information. For you all, I think there are a couple of programs I wanted to highlight today that I think are going to be of interest to you. We have what I would call kind of our flagship grants program that's been around a long time, called our Education Research Grants Program. And within that, we have two topics that I think are of interest. One is the education technology topic, which is focused on supporting research, trying to figure out how existing forms as well as totally new advanced technologies can be applied in education to improve practice. And then the second topic that I think is of interest is the Cognition and Student Learning Program, which is a program that seeks to bridge what we know from cognitive science, neuroscience, developmental psychology, and education practice to try and guide curricula development and revision and develop new tools for instruction and study. We also have the Special Education Research Grants Program, which has similar topics. So if you're interested in students with disabilities, you have similar opportunities under that program. And the final program that I think is of interest has a slightly different timeline. It's our Small Business Innovation Research Program. And this program is focused on innovative product development, research, and commercialization of products for small businesses. And that program, like I said, has a slightly different schedule. Typically, the request for proposals comes out sometime in the winter with a quick turnaround time after that to find out if you've been funded. So keep that in mind. And again, that you can find that on our website. So our website is ies.ed.gov. And then from there, you should be able to navigate to those pieces of information. I will say just a couple things that kind of differentiate us from the NSF programs you've heard about, because I think it's useful to think about like the fact that we do overlap in some ways in the kinds of stuff we fund, but there's clear distinctions. One of them is that at IES we need to focus on formal education settings. So these are schools, classrooms. We are not funding work in museums. We're not funding work that's about parents and children at home, unless somehow it's intersecting with what's going on in the school. And then that also means that the kinds of outcomes that we're focused on are those outcomes that are important to teachers and students, right? So reading, writing, and STEM achievement outcomes that are typically used in school settings. So keep that in mind when you are thinking about putting something in for us and trying to figure out, how you situate your work within IES versus NSF, which I think is a little bit more open about what you can come in with. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Well, good morning. I'm Tony Beck. I'm a program officer at one of the other agencies called the NIH, National Institutes of Health. I'm with a part of the NIH called the National Institute of General Medical Sciences. So it's the fourth largest, which is important for the second part of my presentation, but I'm really pleased to be here. This is a very exciting area of learning because clearly, the current generation of kids from pre-K to high school, put them in a classroom with an outdated book and a teacher that may not have a lot of teaching skills, it's going to be tough. So I want to talk about two programs. One targets pre-K to grade 12, and then there's both classroom, the formal, informal, outside the classroom. And the other part, which was added in the mid-90s, is science center museum projects. So how many of you folks are working pre-K to grade 12? Okay, think about what you could do in 5 years with $1.35 million. That's what the SEPA award is. The program was started in 1991 by the NIH because they realized that there was no diversity in the workforce. And we realized that, workforce diversity equals creativity. So they created the program, and it's fun because the subject matter is anything the NIH funds. And a decade ago, there was this line in the sand, NSF hard science, NIH. Now it's very vague. We fund technology, nanotechnology, and so on. So the subject matter, as I mentioned, is very broad. And the target audience is pre-K to grade 12. We're really encouraging a project with earlier student learning. And the folks here were very nice. They let me put some shameless marketing out. So out at the registration desk, I have my business card. I have the SEPA program has got about 100 projects, active projects right now. It has a .org website, so you can go and look around, talk to people. Everything there is, once it's published, it's been validated by rigorous evaluation. There's a bookmark, and there's also a list of the class of 2019. So you can see what kinds of things we fund. It's a very eclectic group. The other program I want to talk about, and I thank Aaron for getting the start, is the SBIR program, SBIR, Small Business Innovative Research. So how many of you folks are familiar with that? Okay. And this is interesting. When you go back and look at the charter back in the early 90s or 80s, it said Congress wants the federal agencies to fund things too risky for venture capitalists. And the VC, if they get a 10x, once in a while they're happy. And the nice thing about this is that it's, again, if you're designing a game, think what you could create in 2.5 years with $1.7 million. So the SBIR, the phase 1 is 6 months proof of principle, then the phase 2. There's also an STTR, which is leveraging technology from universities. That's less money. But the thing that's really important about this is that, remember, GM has got a very large budget, $2.8 billion. So the checkbook each year for SBIRs is $91 million. So we have a very good pay line. The other part of this that's I think it's really important is that within the SBIR program, IES has their own, but there's something called the omnibus solicitation. So it covers a lot of agencies. It has 3 receipt dates per year: September, January, April. But the CEPA program, out of this, about 10 years ago, I realized we had some very cool stuff using virtual reality, teach kids about organic chemistry, how the brain works. And so I pestered management, they let me do a pilot. So we have what's called a CEPA-specific SBIR STTR. That has 1 receipt date per year, and I have a listing of the current portfolio. It's 25, but when you realize that the entire NIH investment in STEM technology, pre-college STEM, is 0.006% of its budget. So be delighted to chat with folks. Again, I have my business cards with me out there. The next receipt date for the CEPA program, remember this is the K through 12, or pre-K to grade 12, it's going to be June or July of next year. And the program, I always tell folks, go to the website, look around, talk to people, get some ideas, and then send an email and we can talk about ideas. And we're not prescriptive, but we do steer you in the right direction. So again, I really appreciate this audience. This is an exciting area of science, and one of the awardees a few years ago said that in 10 years, using games for learning, we won't have classrooms, we won't have exams. And I think this is the way kids learn, and it really addresses a population of kids who just don't function well in a classroom. So again, thank you very much.
Thank you again to our panelists, to all of you. You've given us a lot of food for thought, lots of opportunities that people might want to consider. As I said, as you've spent the day yesterday and probably overnight ruminating about the sessions you were in and what you heard and ideas that may be percolating for you, think about where those ideas might fit. I'm going to ask our panelists to stay up here for a moment as my colleague Sherry comes up to explain what we're going to do next, which is in part to have each of our panelists go to a table where you can then join them and have conversations and ask questions. Unfortunately, Evan Haidt can't stay with us, but our other 4 colleagues, Henry, Amy, Aaron, and Tony, will be at tables. Evan is headed back to NSF for the Convergence Accelerator meeting, which is happening at the same time today, and we're very grateful that he was able to squeeze this in today. So thank you, Evan, and thanks to our panelists, and I'm going to have Sherry explain what we're going to do next.
Okay, so we're going to have you engage with some future research issues and funding opportunities now, as Sarita mentioned. So our panelists can actually take their table tents, and they are going to select a table. They're going to disperse themselves among the audience, and so then you can self-select who you'd like to speak to. Our NSF program officers that are in the audience who had raised their hands earlier, they are also going to be given table tents, and they will also be available for you to go to and speak to. And so this is a really good opportunity to generate some research questions inspired by everything that you've heard and learned about so far. It's a great opportunity to kind of talk with the program officers about your potential research questions and what might be a good fit for what you would like to research. After that, at about 9:15, 9:20, we're going to do a poll everywhere. And so that question that we want you to keep in mind at 9:15, 9:20 will be, what is a priority research issue for this research community over the next 5 years? And so we'll be putting that up around 9:15, 9:20, and then give people a chance to come up with one or two at your tables to vote on. So just keep that in mind as you guys all discuss at your tables. And you...
Yeah, face that way.
Hi, I'm Susiang Lim. I'm with the former Science of Learning program. Very recently, we changed the name to Science of Learning and Augmented Intelligence. So this is a program that advances sort of fundamental knowledge about learning and the processes, principles of learning. And we're now highlighting also the program's interest in augmented intelligence. And by this we mean how human cognitive function can be augmented, improved through interactions with others, as well as through contextual variations and through enabling technologies. So I think this group is certainly very well poised to attack some of the questions we're interested in. So please visit our website. I'll give you a lot more information. Thank you.
Tanya, can you just say briefly again? People didn't hear you. Can you say once again who you are?
Tanya Karelsky, Information and Intelligence Systems Division of SAIS. I represent SAIS in the program of cyber learning program, and I work in robust intelligence. I can tell you more about the core programs in robust intelligence and connected programs. So my general direct area is human language technologies.
Okay, so now that all the program officers will disperse, you can move around to where you want to talk.